There is an entire industry built around your sleeplessness. Gummies, in capsules, melatonin sprays, prescription sleep aids together. They form a market worth more than $80 billion globally and growing. Every year. And yet, by every available measure, people in the modern world are sleeping worse than they ever have. More restless nights, more exhausted mornings, more lying in the dark, wondering why the silence feels so loud. Here is what that industry does not advertise. People slept before any of that existed. For thousands of years, across every civilization on Earth, human beings found their way to rest using cups of warm liquid brewed from roots, flowers, leaves, and fruit, and the plants they reached for night after night. Generation after generation were not random. They were chosen through centuries of careful observation. And some of what they observed, researchers are only now beginning to understand at the molecular level. Today, we are going through 13 natural drinks that have helped human beings sleep, ranked not by hype, but by the depth of their history and the weight of what science is beginning to confirm. Pay close attention to number 1. It is something most people have had in their kitchens for years without once connecting it to sleep. And stay with me for number 7, because the story behind it involves a man left for dead in a desert, and a moment of restoration that was recorded in Scripture long before anyone knew the biochemistry that made it possible. Number 13. Chamomile tea. In the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical texts in human history, written in Egypt around 1550 BCE, there is a listing for a flowering plant called chamomile, which ancient Egyptians associated with the sun god Ra and used to calm fevers and soothe the body. That plant, most historians believe, was chamomile. The Egyptians were not alone. The Greeks brewed it. The Romans brought it across their empire. Germanic herbalists preserved its use through the medieval period. The Anglo-Saxon tradition included it in one of only 9 sacred healing herbs for nearly 4,000 years, on virtually every continent where it grows. Healers have pressed a warm cup of this small golden flower into the hands of someone who could not find rest. Inside those dried petals is a flavonoid compound called apigenin. What makes apigenin scientifically interesting is not that it relaxes you in some vague, pleasant way. It is that researchers have found it binds to benzodiazepine receptors in the brain. Those are the same receptors that prescription anti-anxiety medications target. The mechanism is gentler, and the effect far milder. But the chemistry is pointing in the same direction that ancient healers pointed empirically, without a laboratory in sight. Studies have found that postpartum women who drank chamomile tea reported improved sleep quality compared to control groups, with results researchers considered significant enough to publish. Whether chamomile works as a sleep aid for everyone is still an open question. The science remains developing, but that it works through a real physiological mechanism, not merely ritual comfort, is no longer in serious doubt. Here is the preparation detail. Most people miss steep, 1 heaped teaspoon of dried chamomile flowers, not a bag, if you can help it, but loose whole flowers in water that has come off a full boil and cooled for about 90 seconds. Cover the cup while it steeps for 10 full minutes. Covering it traps the volatile aromatic compounds that would otherwise escape with the steam. Those compounds are not incidental. They are part of what you are drinking. Strain it. Let it cool to a comfortable warmth, and drink it roughly 45 minutes before you intend to sleep. The color will be a soft, pale gold. One note of honest caution if you have known ragweed allergies. Chamomile sits in the same botanical family and may cause reactions in sensitive individuals. The Egyptians did not have clinical trials. They had generations of careful observation, the kind that builds knowledge slowly and tends not to waste things that do not work. The research is now beginning to examine why they were right. Number 12. Warm milk with honey. This one appears in Scripture, in Proverbs. Milk and honey together represent the fullness of nourishment. The promised land is described as flowing with them. In the Song of Solomon, the beloved says, "I have drunk my wine with my milk." In the Talmud, warm drinks at nighttime are mentioned in the context of rest and health. The pairing is ancient beyond reckoning, but the cross-cultural reach of this combination is what strikes researchers. Ancient Ayurvedic texts from the Indian subcontinent, particularly the Karaka Samhita, one of the foundational texts of traditional Indian medicine, specifically prescribe warm milk with honey for promoting sleep, calling it ojas, the essence of vitality and rest. Chinese medical tradition, as recorded in the Huangdi Neijing, placed similar value on warm, nourishing drinks at the end of the day as part of circadian alignment practice. 3. Independent traditions. The same prescription. Modern nutritional science offers at least a partial explanation. Milk contains tryptophan, an amino acid the body uses as a precursor to serotonin, which in turn converts to melatonin, the hormone that signals the brain it is time for darkness and rest. The amounts are modest. 1 cup of milk will not flood your brain with melatonin. But here is what the research is beginning to examine: the glycemic effect of the honey may matter. A small, measured rise in blood glucose appears to help shuttle tryptophan across the blood-brain barrier more efficiently, potentially amplifying what a cup of milk alone would do. The honey is not decoration. It may be chemistry. Use 1 tablespoon of raw, unfiltered honey, the kind that may be cloudy, or even partially crystallized, stirred into milk that has been warmed to just below a simmer. You want steam, not bubbles. Heat it to approximately 65 degrees Celsius, or 150 Fahrenheit, warm enough to dissolve the honey, cool enough to drink comfortably. The flavor is gentle and familiar, sweet, faintly grassy, deeply calm. The ritual itself is not nothing. The act of warming something with your hands, the scent, the slowing down, these cue the nervous system in ways that are not imaginary. Our ancestors understood that bedtime was not something that happened to you. It was something you prepared for. Small, steady comforts, practiced nightly. That understanding is not obsolete. Number 11. Lemon balm tea. The Greek physician Dioscorides wrote that lemon balm, which he called melissa, the Greek word for honeybee, could be used to lift the spirits and ease the heart. The name itself tells you something. Bees are drawn to its flowers with almost irrational devotion, which is why medieval beekeepers rubbed the hive entrance with fresh lemon balm leaves to keep swarms calm and close to home. The medieval abbess and mystic Hildegard von Bingen, writing in 12th century Germany, prescribed it specifically for what she called dejection of the soul. That is not far from what we would now call anxiety-driven insomnia, the racing thoughts, the inability to let the day go, the mind that remains locked in the previous 12 hours long after the body has stopped moving. What researchers are now examining is lemon balm's effect on GABA, the principal inhibitory neurotransmitter in the human central nervous system. GABA's job, broadly speaking, is to reduce neuronal excitability to tell the brain to quiet down. Compounds in lemon balm, particularly rosmarinic acid, appear to inhibit an enzyme called GABA transaminase, which breaks down GABA. The result, in early research models, is a mild prolonging of GABA activity. A clinical study published in Phytomedicine found that a standardized lemon balm extract reduced anxiety and insomnia symptoms in participants with mild to moderate sleep disorders, with researchers noting the results were meaningful enough to warrant further investigation. The preparation is simple. Use 2 teaspoons of fresh leaves, or 1 teaspoon dried, steeped in just boiled water for 8 minutes covered. Fresh is noticeably superior. Here, the volatile oils that carry lemon balm's characteristic soft citrus fragrance degrade quickly once dried. If you have even a small garden or a pot on a windowsill, lemon balm is one of the easiest herbs you will ever grow. It spreads aggressively in favorable conditions, which means you will rarely run short. Lemon balm pairs beautifully with chamomile. The two together create something herbalists have called a nervine blend, a combination designed specifically for the nervous system at the end of a long day. They didn't have the GABA research in medieval Germany. They had the stillness of a room after a cup of this herb. The research is catching up to what they already knew. Number 10. Passionflower tea. When Spanish missionaries arrived in the Americas in the 16th century, they encountered a climbing vine with flowers so complex and structurally unusual that they believed the blossom told the story of the Passion of Christ, the crown of thorns in the corona filaments, the 3 stigmas as the nails, the 5 anthers for the wounds. They called it passiflora. The name has stuck for 500 years. But indigenous peoples of the Americas, including the Aztecs and various North American tribes, had been using this plant long before any European arrived. The Cherokee used it for anxiety and restlessness. Mesoamerican healers incorporated it into preparations for mental tension. When European herbalists brought passionflower back to the Old World, it was adopted quickly into traditional medicine there as well. What makes this particular convergence remarkable is not that one culture used it, or even 2. It is that entirely isolated civilizations, with no contact across the Atlantic, arrived independently at the same plant for the same purpose. That pattern of convergence, unconnected peoples reaching the same conclusion, is its own form of evidence. It suggests not tradition being passed along, but observation being made independently, over and over. Because the plant is actually doing something. Modern pharmacological research has found that passionflower contains compounds including chrysin and vitexin that appear to interact with GABA-A receptors in the brain, similar in mechanism to the way some pharmaceutical anxiolytics work, though considerably milder in effect. A randomized controlled trial published in Phytotherapy Research found that participants who drank passionflower tea for 1 week reported significantly improved sleep quality on standardized measures, with the most pronounced effects on the subjective sense of sleep quality and the feeling of waking rested. These are preliminary findings, and the study was small, but the researchers considered the results worth continued investigation. Steep 1 heaped teaspoon of dried passionflower herb in just boiled water, covered, for 10 minutes. The color steeps to a pale greenish yellow. The taste is mild, faintly grassy, and not unpleasant, especially with a small drizzle of honey. Drink it within an hour of sleep. Passionflower is generally not recommended during pregnancy, and if you are on sedative medications, the combination warrants a conversation with your physician. The Cherokee did not have GABA receptor research. They had centuries of observation, carefully preserved. When the missionary looked at that flower and saw a story of death and resurrection, he may have been closer to the plant's actual purpose than he realized. It has been quieting restless minds ever since. Number 9. Tart cherry juice. Here is the one on this list that genuinely surprised researchers when they began looking at it seriously. Montmorency tart cherries are not the cherries you eat by the handful in summer. They are smaller, more acidic, and primarily processed into juice or dried form. Indigenous peoples of the Great Lakes region, where Montmorency cherries are most commonly cultivated today, used wild cherries medicinally for centuries, particularly for inflammation and pain. European settlers recorded their use, but nobody, for most of that history, was thinking about sleep. What changed the conversation was the discovery that Montmorency tart cherries are one of the few significant food sources of dietary melatonin. Not a supplement analog, not a synthetic version. Actual melatonin, the same molecule the pineal gland secretes to regulate the circadian rhythm, present in measurable quantities in the juice of this specific cherry variety. 2 randomized, placebo-controlled trials, one published in the European Journal of Nutrition and one in the Journal of Medicinal Food, found that participants who consumed tart cherry juice twice daily slept measurably longer and more efficiently than control groups. One trial reported an average increase in total sleep time of approximately 84 minutes. The researchers also noted elevated urinary melatonin metabolites in cherry juice drinkers, confirming that the melatonin from the juice was being absorbed and processed by the body. There is a second mechanism worth noting. Tart cherries are high in a class of compounds called anthocyanins, the pigments that give them their deep red color, which have shown significant anti-inflammatory properties in laboratory settings. Inflammation and pain are among the most underappreciated causes of disrupted sleep in older adults. The anti-inflammatory action may be part of why the sleep improvements in these trials were meaningful. 8 ounces of unsweetened tart cherry juice, consumed approximately an hour before bed. This is not cherry-flavored beverage or sweetened cherry cocktail. It must be pure. Unsweetened juice. Ideally cold-pressed and not from concentrate. The taste is sharp and tart. Some people dilute it with a small amount of water. If blood sugar management is a concern, speak with your physician before making it a nightly habit. The sugar content is real. Our ancestors treasured this fruit without knowing why. The research is now quantifying what the tradition already knew. Number 8. Golden milk. Turmeric has been in continuous recorded medical use for at least 4,000 years. In Ayurvedic medicine, the preparation called haldi duda, golden milk, appears in texts going back centuries. Prescribed for inflammation, infection, and what practitioners called the disruption of vata energy, the anxious, ungrounded, wind-like quality that in modern language we might describe as a nervous system that cannot settle down at the end of the day. But the historical reach of turmeric extends far beyond India. The ancient Chinese pharmacopoeia records it as Jing Huang, yellow ginger, used in traditional Chinese medicine for stagnation and heat. Arab physicians in the medieval Islamic Golden Age, particularly Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, whose canon of medicine was a standard medical text in European universities for centuries, wrote extensively about turmeric's applications. Dioscorides, in the 1st century CE, described a plant closely resembling it used in Greek medicine. The cross-civilizational reach is striking. The active compound in turmeric that modern researchers focus on most intensively is curcumin. What is less commonly understood is that curcumin alone is poorly bioavailable. The human body struggles to absorb it. The traditional recipe for golden milk includes black pepper, and there is a reason that is not incidental. Black pepper contains a compound called piperine, which has been shown in studies to increase curcumin bioavailability by up to 2,000%. Ayurvedic cooks did not know piperine by name, but they knew the two belonged together, and they were right about the underlying chemistry for 4,000 years before the research confirmed it. Warm, not boil, 1 cup of milk or unsweetened plant-based milk to approximately 60 degrees Celsius. Whisk in half a teaspoon of ground turmeric, a small pinch of black pepper, and optionally a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Sweeten lightly with raw honey if desired. Added after the heat is off. The color is a deep, warm amber gold. The taste is earthy, faintly spiced, and genuinely comforting. Some people add a small piece of fresh ginger, which amplifies the warming quality and adds its own gently anti-inflammatory compounds. Do not boil it. High heat degrades curcumin. The traditional instruction to warm but not boil is not arbitrary. It preserves the chemistry. The ancient physicians did not have mass spectrometry. They had careful hands and long memories. The research is learning to measure what they already felt. Number 7. Warm honey water. And what the biochemistry says it was actually doing. Stay with me here, because this one goes deeper than most people expect. In 1 Kings 19, the prophet Elijah has just fled into the desert. He is not merely tired, he is finished. He has asked God to take his life. He lies down under a broom tree in the wilderness, exposed to heat, without water, without food, in a state of profound physical and psychological collapse. And then an angel appears, and touches him. Arise and eat. The angel says, and beside Elijah there is a cake baked on coals, and a jar of water. He eats and lies back down. The angel comes a second time, touches him again. Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. Elijah eats again, drinks again, and then rises and walks 40 days and 40 nights on the strength of that food, to the mountain of God. Ancient readers understood this as a miracle. And in the theological sense, it is. But here's what the text is also describing. In language that predates biochemistry by 3,000 years, a man in a hypoglycemic, hypovolemic, cortisol-flooded state depleted of glucose, depleted of fluid. His nervous system locked in a fight-or-flight activation so severe he could not continue being restored by water and simple carbohydrates. That is not just poetry. That is a physiological description of rehydration and glycogen replenishment. What the angel gave Elijah is, in modern nutritional terms, approximately what you would give an endurance athlete after total depletion, simple carbohydrates and water, consumed twice, with rest in between. The honey that appears elsewhere in Scripture, Proverbs 2:4-1-3. Eat honey, my son, for it is good, is not incidental decoration. Honey was one of the few concentrated sources of rapidly available glucose in the ancient world. Before refined sugar, before intravenous glucose administration, honey was what you gave someone when they needed to be stabilized. Here is the sleep connection, and it is more direct than it might first appear. During sleep, the brain requires a steady supply of glucose. If blood glucose drops too low during the night, a condition sometimes called nocturnal hypoglycemia, which is more common than people realize, particularly in older adults, the adrenal glands release cortisol and adrenaline to raise it. Those stress hormones cause waking, heart pounding, and difficulty returning to sleep. A small amount of glucose consumed before bed can create a stable glycemic floor that prevents this nocturnal stress response from firing. 1 tablespoon, just one of raw, unfiltered honey stirred into a cup of warm water roughly 20 minutes before bed is all that is needed. The honey should be raw. The heat processing used in commercial honey production degrades enzymes and may alter the glycemic properties that matter here. The water should be warm, not hot, comfortable enough to sip, warm enough to dissolve the honey completely. Elijah walked 40 days after that encounter. Whatever the theological meaning, the human body that walked those 40 days was restored by something real. The research is beginning to examine, 3,000 years later, exactly how. If this kind of ancient knowledge resonates with you, the places where old wisdom and modern science meet in ways that no one is talking about, hit like and subscribe right now. What we have coming next goes even deeper into the plants and traditions that have quietly supported human health for thousands of years. You do not want to miss it. Number 6. Ashwagandha tea. Used for a concept modern science didn't have a word for yet. The Sanskrit name is Withania somnifera. The second word, somnifera, means sleep-inducing. Ancient Indian physicians were precise enough in their botanical naming that they encoded the plant's primary function directly into its taxonomic identity. This is not a plant that slipped into sleep tradition casually. It was classified as a sleep herb from the beginning, the Charaka Samhita, one of the 2 foundational texts of Ayurvedic medicine, compiled roughly between 400 BCE and 200 CE, classifies ashwagandha as a rasayana, a rejuvenating substance, and recommends it specifically for conditions the ancient physicians described as excessive mental activity, wasting, and physical depletion. What they were describing, in the language available to them, maps remarkably well onto what we now call HPA axis dysregulation, the condition in which chronic stress keeps cortisol chronically elevated, disrupting sleep architecture and making it difficult to cross the threshold into deep, restorative sleep. The research on ashwagandha is more substantive than its supplement industry reputation might suggest. A randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial published in Medicine in 2019 enrolled 60 participants with insomnia and found that those who received ashwagandha root extract showed significant improvement in sleep onset latency, total sleep time, sleep efficiency, and scores on the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. A 2020 meta-analysis of 5 randomized trials confirmed the directional consistency of these findings, though the authors noted that effect sizes varied and that higher quality long-term studies are still needed. The specific compounds most studied are a class called withanolides, particularly with afrin A and withanolide D, which appear to modulate the stress response through multiple pathways, including an effect on GABA receptors. For tea, 1 teaspoon of ashwagandha root powder can be simmered, not merely steeped in 1 cup of milk, dairy, or plant-based for 15 minutes. Ashwagandha is fat-soluble, which is why traditional preparations use milk rather than water. Add a small pinch of cardamom and a light drizzle of honey after removing from heat. The taste is earthy and slightly bitter, with a distinctive quality that takes some adjustment. Strain if you prefer a smoother texture. Ashwagandha is not appropriate during pregnancy. It may interact with thyroid medications and immunosuppressants. As always, caution and professional guidance matter. The ancient physicians observed something about this root that they could not fully explain. They named it for what it did. The research is now learning why. Number 5. Valerian root tea. Valerian is a case study in how honest ancient knowledge does not always come in a pleasant package. The Roman physician Galen, in the 2nd century CE, wrote about valerian's calming properties. So did the Persian physician Ibn Sina in the 11th century. In medieval Europe, Hildegard von Bingen prescribed it, as did herbalists across the Germanic and Scandinavian traditions. The plant was so consistently associated with sleep and calm in European folk medicine that during World War I and World War II, valerian root was distributed to civilians in England to manage the anxiety and sleeplessness caused by bombardment. Government-issued plant medicine for wartime psychological support. That level of institutional adoption tells you the folk tradition was taken seriously by people who had to make practical decisions under pressure. It smells, to put the matter plainly, like unwashed feet. The sulfur-containing compounds responsible for valerian's aroma, particularly isovaleric acid, are a significant impediment to its popularity. And yet people have been drinking it for 20 centuries, which suggests the effect was real enough to tolerate the smell. The proposed mechanism involves valerianic acid, which appears to modulate GABA receptors similar in direction, again, to how benzodiazepine medications work, though far milder and without the dependency risks associated with those drugs. The research is genuinely mixed. Some well-designed studies show meaningful improvement in sleep onset and quality. Others show no significant difference from placebo. The science has not settled this question neatly. And intellectual honesty requires acknowledging that. What the research does consistently show is that valerian's effects appear to build over time rather than occurring immediately. This is not a one-night solution. Traditional herbalists consistently recommended it as a course of weeks, not a single dose. That temporal aspect may explain why some short-term studies miss the effect entirely. Steep 1 teaspoon of dried valerian root in cut and sifted form rather than powder, which steeps more cleanly in just boiled water for 10 to 15 minutes. Tightly covered. The color is pale brown. The smell is significant. A small amount of honey and a cinnamon stick improve the experience meaningfully. Drink approximately 30 minutes before bed. Valerian interacts with sedative medications, including some antihistamines and benzodiazepines, and should not be combined with alcohol. It is not recommended during pregnancy. Galen was not wrong. Neither were the wartime physicians distributing it in the Blitz. The research simply has not yet found the methodology to measure cleanly what 2,000 years of human experience recorded. Number 4. Lavender tea. The Roman practice of adding lavender to bathwater was not primarily aesthetic. The word lavender derives from the Latin lavare, to wash. And the Romans, who bathed in lavender-scented water and noted its calming effect on the mind, were observing something that modern research on olfaction and the nervous system now has a detailed explanation for. The nose is the only sensory organ with direct neural connections to the limbic system, with the brain's emotional and memory center, without routing through the thalamus first. Every other sense is filtered. The olfactory system is not. This means that aromatic compounds inhaled through the nose have more direct, faster access to the parts of the brain that regulate emotional state and stress response than any other sensory input. The Romans, who noticed that lavender baths made them feel calmer, were not imagining it. They were experiencing a genuine neurological effect delivered through the fastest available pathway. The specific compounds most studied are linalool and linalool acetate, both present in lavender essential oil and, in lesser concentrations, in lavender tea. Clinical research has found that linalool modulates glutamate receptors, which are involved in excitatory signaling in the nervous system, meaning it may reduce neural excitability, supporting a shift toward the quieter state that precedes sleep. A meta-analysis of clinical trials on lavender for anxiety and sleep found consistent evidence of a calming effect, with the researchers noting results sufficient to support continued investigation. Here is the preparation detail that matters. Lavender is potent. Too much lavender in a tea tastes like drinking soap. Use no more than half a teaspoon of dried culinary-grade lavender buds, not florist lavender, which may be treated with chemicals per cup of water. Steep for 5 minutes only, not longer, and pair it with chamomile to round out the flavor. The color is a soft, faintly bluish gray. The fragrance rises from the cup before you even begin to drink. And that fragrance is already doing something to your nervous system before the first sip. The Mediterranean farmers who dried lavender and tucked it inside their linen did not know about linalool. They knew that the smell helped them rest. The research is now reading the mechanism behind the same observation. Number 3. Linden flower tea. If you walk through old towns in Germany, Austria, or the Czech Republic, you will often find a massive, ancient linden tree at the center of the village square. In German-speaking countries, the linden balm carries a cultural weight comparable to the oak in England. Meetings were held beneath them. Justice was administered in their shade. But the medicinal use of the flowers is what concerns us here. Linden blossom tea, Lindenblüten tea in German, appears in European herbalism, going back at least to the 12th century. Hildegard von Bingen wrote about it. By the Renaissance, it was one of the most widely used calming herbs in the European herbal tradition. The flowers bloom briefly in early summer, sometimes only 2 weeks, and they have been harvested by hand in Central European villages during that window for centuries. Dried carefully and stored for year-round use. The chemical profile of linden flowers includes flavonoids, particularly quercetin, and camphorol glycosides, as well as volatile compounds, including farnesol and citronellol, which are also found in calming essential oils. The research on linden specifically for sleep is limited compared to some other herbs on this list, but its consistent presence across 8 centuries of Central European medical writing for nervous agitation and sleeplessness, and its structural chemical similarity to compounds that have been studied in anxiety models, suggest it deserves more research attention than it has received. Here is a preparation detail. Almost no one mentions the best linden flower tea is made from flowers that still have their bract, the long, pale greenish leaf attached to the flower cluster. The bract contains compounds that are sometimes processed out in commercial preparations. If you can source whole linden flowers with bracts intact, the tea is meaningfully more complex and, traditional herbalists would argue, more effective. Steep 1 heaped tablespoon of whole dried linden flowers and bracts per cup of water that is cooled slightly from a boil about 85 degrees Celsius for 8 minutes. Covered. The color is pale gold. The flavor is mild, slightly sweet, and faintly floral in a way that is entirely different from chamomile or lavender. Add a small amount of honey if desired. Those Central European villages built towns around linden trees for reasons that were partly symbolic and partly deeply practical. The flowers that fell in summer were one of the most reliable sleep medicines they had. Number 2. Decaffeinated green tea. Green tea is one of the most studied plants on Earth. The Chinese pharmacopoeia, specifically the Shenong Bencao Jing, the foundational text of Chinese herbal medicine traditionally attributed to the mythological emperor Shenong around 2700 BCE, includes tea as one of its 365 medicinal substances. Japanese Buddhist monks in the 12th century drank it to stay alert during long meditation sessions. Japanese scholars in the same period discovered that it could also help them remain calm. These two things, alert and calm, simultaneously seem contradictory. They are not. And the reason they are not is a compound called L-theanine. L-theanine is an amino acid found almost exclusively in tea plants and certain mushrooms. It is structurally similar to glutamate, an excitatory neurotransmitter, which is why it can cross the blood-brain barrier efficiently. But rather than exciting the brain, L-theanine has been found to promote alpha wave activity, the brain wave pattern associated with relaxed alertness. This is the mental state of a meditating monk, or a person who is fully rested and completely calm. It is not sedation. It is the quieting of mental noise. In the context of sleep, L-theanine's value is most pronounced for people whose sleep difficulty lies in falling asleep in the transition from wakefulness to rest. When the mind continues to generate the thoughts and anxieties that mark the day, studies have found that L-theanine supplementation improved the subjective quality of sleep in young adults, particularly reducing what researchers called recovery from fatigue. A study in boys with ADHD found meaningful improvements in sleep efficiency. The results across populations are not uniform, but the direction is consistent enough to take seriously. The non-negotiable preparation condition: the tea must be decaffeinated. Regular green tea contains enough caffeine to be counterproductive in the evening. Choose a high-quality decaffeinated green tea, ideally one decaffeinated through the CO2 process rather than chemical solvent extraction, which preserves more of the delicate polyphenols and L-theanine. Steep at 75 to 80 degrees Celsius, never boiling, for 3 minutes only. Overcooking green tea at high temperature produces bitterness and can degrade the compounds you are drinking it for. The color should be a clear, pale jade green. The Buddhist monks who drank tea to sustain meditation across hours of stillness were, without knowing it, managing their L-theanine levels. The research is now studying why the monks were right. Number 1. Warm almond milk with saffron, the drink that appears in the Bible, and the royal courts of Persia, and what it contains that nothing else on this list does. Almonds appear in Genesis, in the account of Jacob sending gifts to Egypt. Almonds are listed alongside spices and honey luxury items, precious enough to function as diplomatic currency. When Moses constructs the menorah in Exodus, its cups are described as being shaped like almond blossoms. Almonds were among the first foods mentioned in the oldest historical documents of the Hebrew people. They were not a common food. They were a treasured one. Here is what makes almonds remarkable. From a sleep science perspective, they contain the highest concentration of magnesium of any tree nut. And magnesium's role in sleep is more mechanistically direct than many people realize. Magnesium activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest branch, as opposed to the fight or flight branch. It regulates melatonin production. It reduces cortisol. And critically, it binds to GABA receptors in the brain, amplifying the calming effect that GABA produces. This is the same receptor system that chamomile, passionflower, valerian, and lemon balm all interact with. Magnesium is doing it as an essential mineral, not as a plant compound. A warm cup of almond milk delivers approximately 17 milligrams of magnesium, a modest contribution toward the 310 to 420 milligrams per day recommended for adults, but meaningful as part of a consistent evening ritual. Now, here is where this drink becomes something genuinely uncommon. Add saffron. Saffron appears in the Song of Solomon. It appears in the Ebers Papyrus as a medicinal substance used in ancient Egypt. Persian physicians prescribed it for mood and sleep as far back as the 4th century BCE. In the ancient world, saffron was worth more by weight than gold, literally. Its medicinal use was documented across every civilization that had access to it. What researchers have found in saffron is a compound called saffronol, along with crocin and crocetin, that appears to inhibit the reuptake of serotonin in a mechanism broadly similar to, though much milder, than the SSRI antidepressant medications. A meta-analysis of clinical trials found that saffron supplementation significantly reduced scores on depression and anxiety rating scales compared to placebo. A separate study found that a small daily dose of saffron, 100 milligrams, the amount in a light pinch of the spice, improved sleep quality scores significantly over 6 weeks, with participants reporting improved sleep onset and reduced nighttime waking. Here is what makes saffron genuinely different from every other item on this list. It is not merely sedating. It appears to address the underlying emotional and neurological states that prevent sleep in the first place: the anxiety, the low mood, the sense of unease that many older adults carry into bed at the end of the day. Warm almond milk quiets the body through magnesium. Saffron quietly adjusts the chemistry underneath the restlessness. The preparation is specific. Warm 1 cup of unsweetened almond milk to approximately 65 degrees Celsius. Take a small pinch of saffron, no more than 5 to 6 threads, and crumble them between your fingers into a small amount of warm water to bloom them first. Let them steep in that warm water for 3 minutes. The color will shift from orange-red to a golden amber yellow, and the aroma will open distinctly. Add the bloomed saffron and its water to the warm almond milk. Stir in a single drop of vanilla extract and a small amount of raw honey. The color of the final drink is a warm, pale gold. The taste is extraordinarily gentle, sweet, faintly floral, and deeply warming in a way that is difficult to describe but unmistakable once you have experienced it. Do not use saffron in large quantities. It is potent and, in excessive amounts, can be toxic. A pinch, a few threads, is the right amount. More is not more. The ancient world called it the king of spices and reserved it for royalty and ritual. The research is now measuring 3,000 years later what those royal physicians already knew. A final word. The principle behind all 13. There is something these 13 drinks share that is worth naming before you go. Every single item on this list: the chamomile, the honey water, the linden blossom. The saffron contains active compounds that depend entirely on how you prepare them. Heat destroys apigenin. Boiling degrades curcumin. Processing strips L-theanine. Refining honey alters its glycemic profile. Commercial chamomile bags use powdered flowers that have already lost the aromatic volatile compounds you are actually trying to consume. The most important principle in the entire tradition these drinks represent is that the whole, unprocessed, carefully prepared form is not equivalent to the refined, mass-produced, in substitute. This is true of every plant on this list, and it is why the shift from whole plant medicine to isolated supplement, from linden flower tea to linden extract capsule, often fails to replicate what the original preparation accomplished. The preparations your ancestors used were not crude versions of something more sophisticated. In many cases, they were the correct delivery mechanism for active compounds that modern processing inadvertently destroys. This is the question worth sitting with after this video ends. How many other things did the ancient world get right, not because they were unsophisticated, but because they were careful, because they paid attention over centuries to what actually happened when they used a plant a specific way, at a specific time, prepared a specific way? And how much of that careful knowledge are we in the process of discarding in the name of convenience? The research is beginning to read those answers back to us. Sometimes it confirms the tradition exactly. Sometimes it finds nuance that the tradition missed. Occasionally, it finds that the tradition was wrong. But the pattern that keeps emerging across civilizations across millennia, across compounds, is that the plants our ancestors returned to, generation after generation, usually had a reason to be returned to. Sleep well, rest deeply, and the next time you are lying awake at 2 inches the morning wondering what to do, consider that somewhere in your kitchen, the answer may already be waiting. If this kind of content speaks to something in you, the place where ancient wisdom and modern research quietly agree, hit the like button and share this video with someone who needs a better night's sleep. Leave a comment below telling me which drink on this list surprised you most. And subscribe if you haven't already, because we are going much deeper into the places where old knowledge and new science meet in ways that no one is talking about yet. Until next time.